Humiliated when bullies ripped her gown. Her secret billionaire husband arrived and bought the entire bar. Chapter 1. It all started on a night no one could ever forget. The air outside the bar smelled of wet asphalt and cheap perfume, and the neon lights blinked like they were tired of pretending to shine on a town that had already lost its glow. Inside, laughter echoed, a kind that didn't come from joy, but from the cruelty of people who needed someone weaker to feel stronger. She stood near the center of it all, wearing a pale blue gown that shimmered faintly under the dim lights. Her name was Ilara. You could tell from her eyes that she wasn't used to scenes like this. Those eyes carried something soft, something not built for the bitterness of the world. She had walked into that bar only to celebrate a friend's promotion, but the night had other plans. A group of women at the far table noticed her immediately. They whispered, then giggled, their words slicing the air like invisible knives. The ringleader, Marcy, the kind who had to humiliate others just to feel seen, raised her drink and smirked. "Look who thinks she belongs here," she said loud enough for half the bar to hear. Ilara froze for a second but smiled politely. She'd learned that silence was safer than confrontation. But when she turned to leave, someone grabbed her sleeve. A sudden rip echoed, small at first, then loud like a curtain being torn open. Her gown split down the back seam, and the room filled with gasps followed by laughter. And that's where our story begins, right in the middle of humiliation, pride, and heartbreak. You see, moments like these define who we really are. Not the happy ones, not the polished, filtered pictures of our lives, but the raw, ugly, exposed moments when the world laughs and you have to decide whether to hide or rise. Ilara's hands shook as she clutched the torn fabric to her chest. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just stood there, silent, trembling, humiliated, while the laughter grew louder. The bartender, an older man who'd seen too many nights like this, looked away. He'd learned that stepping in only made things worse. But not everyone in that bar was cruel. In the corner, someone sat quietly, watching everything with a kind of stillness that didn't fit the chaos around him. No one noticed him because he didn't want to be noticed. He wore a simple dark jacket, plain jeans, and had the kind of quiet presence that made people overlook him. But his name was not plain. It was Ronan Vale. And Ronan was not just anyone. He was the kind of man who owned things people didn't even know were for sale. He moved through life like a secret, silent, observant, always 2 steps ahead of the noise. But that night, as he watched Ilara clutch her torn gown with shaking hands, something shifted in him. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had come to that small-town bar because he wanted to remember what ordinary felt like. Billionaires don't usually sit alone in cracked leather booths, drinking flat soda and listening to bad country music. But Ronan had built an empire so vast that even the silence of success had begun to feel like a cage. Now, as he watched her humiliation unfold, he felt something stir. A mix of anger, empathy, and protectiveness that he hadn't felt in years. At that moment, as Ilara turned away from the crowd and hurried toward the exit, her eyes met his for the briefest second. There was something in that glance, like 2 storms recognizing each other across a quiet sea. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. Ilara pushed through the door and stepped into the cold night. The rain had started again, soft but relentless, soaking her hair and gown. She didn't have a car. She'd come with friends who were now too busy laughing inside. She walked fast, not knowing where to go, just needing to move. The sound of her heels on the wet pavement mixed with her uneven breathing. Behind her, the door creaked open. A few seconds later, she heard footsteps, slow, steady, unhurried. She didn't turn around until she heard a voice, calm and deep, saying, "Hey, wait." He turned. It was him, the man from the corner. She didn't recognize him, not really. But something about his voice made her stop. He took off his jacket and handed it to her. "You shouldn't have to walk like that," he said softly. She hesitated, looking at him through rain-damp lashes. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to," he replied. "Some things don't require knowing." There was silence for a moment, an unspoken understanding between 2 strangers who'd both learned what it meant to be invisible. She finally took the jacket. It was warm, heavy, and smelled faintly of cedar. Ronan watched her for a long second before saying, "You handled that better than most would've." Ilara let out a tired laugh. "You mean not screaming?" "I mean not breaking," he said. "There's a difference." For the first time that night she smiled, A small, broken thing but real. They stood there in the drizzle, two people from different worlds, both trying to figure out how to breathe again. Inside the bar, Marcy and her friends still laughed, unaware that their cruelty had just rewritten someone's life story. Ilara eventually said she needed to get home, and Ronan offered to walk her. She refused at first, but he insisted, not in a forceful way, but with quiet concern. As they walked, she noticed he didn't fill the silence with empty words. He just walked beside her, matching her pace, listening when she spoke about how small towns never forget. He didn't tell her who he was. Not yet. He wanted her to see him as a man, not as a name. When they reached her apartment building, she handed him his jacket, but he shook his head. "Keep it. You'll need it more than I will." She looked at him, confused but grateful. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Don't thank me yet." That night, after she closed her door, she finally cried. Quiet tears that fell onto the same jacket she wrapped around herself like armor. She didn't know the man's name, didn't know that the one who had seen her humiliation would soon change her life forever. And Ronan, standing outside in the rain, looked up at the flickering streetlight and made a silent promise. He didn't know why, but he needed to make sure no one ever made her feel small again. The next evening, the same bar was busier than usual. Word had spread about the incident. Small towns feed on gossip like fire feeds on oxygen. Marcy was at the same table, laughing as if nothing had happened. The bartender kept his head down, trying not to take sides. Then the door opened. Everyone turned because the sound wasn't just of a door. It was of boots stepping in with purpose. The air changed, heavy with unspoken tension. Ronan walked in, dressed sharply this time. His presence drew eyes like gravity. Marcy's laughter stuttered. "Can we help you?" she asked, trying to sound bold. Ronan didn't answer. He just looked around the room, then at the bartender. "You own this place." The man shook his head. "No, sir. It's owned by someone out of town." "Not anymore," Ronan said. "I just bought it." The room went dead silent. Marcy's smirk faded into confusion, then fear. He turned to her and said, "You like making people feel small, don't you?" She didn't answer. "Well," he continued, "consider this your last night doing it here. You're banned." The bartender's jaw dropped. Everyone stared. Ronan reached into his coat pocket, handed over a folder of signed papers and said, "Effective immediately. And tell everyone, treat people better. You never know who's watching." He turned and walked out before anyone could react. The door closed behind him, leaving the bar in stunned silence. Ilara found out about it the next day when a friend called her. At first she didn't believe it. But then she saw the headline on her phone, "Local bar changes ownership overnight." That's when it hit her. The man who gave her his jacket, the one who said she hadn't broken, had been watching all along. That night, she pulled the jacket tighter around her shoulders and whispered into the quiet, "Who are you?" But she'd find out soon enough. Because sometimes life doesn't just bring you redemption. It brings you someone who sees your worth before you see it yourself. Someone who walks into your storm and doesn't just offer you an umbrella. He rebuilds the entire sky. And just when Ilara thought her story had ended, it was only beginning. Because Ronan Vale was not done yet. He had one more surprise waiting for her. But that is a story for the next chapter. Chapter 2. The headlights carved through the quiet country road as Rowan drove them away from the town that had turned into a battlefield of whispers. Neither of them spoke. The hum of the engine was the only sound between them, steady, almost fragile. Aria's fingers rested against the torn edge of her dress, the soft fabric fluttering against her wrist like a memory she wanted to forget but couldn't. Outside, the night was thick with silence and the scent of pine. He glanced at her, his jaw tight, the reflection of the passing lights slicing across his face. She looked smaller than he remembered, folded against the window, fighting to keep her tears from falling. He wanted to say something, anything, but every word felt too small for the weight sitting between them. They crossed the bridge leading out of Willow Creek, the river below glinting like spilled glass. Somewhere behind them, the bar lights dimmed for good. Rowan had bought it, yes, but money couldn't erase the sound of laughter that had burned through her dignity. She finally spoke, voice low and trembling. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. "Buying that place, it just made it worse." He tightened his grip on the wheel. "Worse for who, Aria?" The people who tore your dress or the ones who sat and laughed? She turned to him, eyes bright with quiet anger. For me. I didn't need saving. I just needed to get out of there. He looked at her, really looked. You didn't need saving, he said softly. But I needed to stand beside you. There's a difference. The car slowed as the countryside opened wide. Fields rolling under moonlight, the horizon bleeding silver and blue. He pulled over near a small ridge overlooking the water. For a moment the world went still. Only the wind moved. Arya stepped out first, letting the night air wrap around her. The hem of her gown brushed the dirt, the torn fabric catching on a wildflower. Rowan joined her, slipping his jacket over her shoulders without a word. She didn't refuse this time. They stood there in silence. The river below murmured its endless song, and the stars blinked like they were listening. He finally said, I came back early because I missed you. I didn't expect to walk into that. Her voice cracked. I didn't expect to become the joke of the night. He moved closer but didn't touch her yet. They don't matter. You do. For the first time since that cruel moment, she let out a shaky breath. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the beginning of one. Hi viewers, the narrator's tone softened for the audience. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Rowan's eyes softened. You made that dress yourself, didn't you? Arya nodded. I just wanted to feel beautiful for one night. I didn't think that was too much to ask. He stepped closer until their shadows overlapped. You were beautiful, he said. You always are. She turned her face away, but he saw the hint of a smile that tried to form and failed. You think money fixes everything, she whispered. But some wounds aren't for sale. He took that in quietly. Then tell me how to make it right. She looked up at him, eyes dark, tired, still shining with defiance. Just be here. Not as the man with everything. Just you. For the first time in a long while, Rowan let the mask slip. The business mind, the billionaire image, it all fell away. Standing there under the stars, he looked simply human. Then I'll stay, he said. Every minute that you'll let me. The wind carried their silence, and for a moment it was almost peace. But peace has a way of testing those who crave it most. When they reached home, a quiet house tucked between old trees and open sky, Arya walked straight inside and sat near the fireplace. The torn gown pooled around her like blue smoke. Rowan lingered at the doorway, watching her as if afraid to breathe too loud. She began to sew the torn fabric with careful fingers. Thread after thread, she mended what others had broken. He noticed the patience in her hands, the same patience she had shown when life refused to be kind. Why not just throw it away, he asked softly. She didn't look up. Because that's what they want, to see me discard what they ruined. But I won't give them that satisfaction. Her tone carried quiet fire, the kind that could outlast shame. He walked closer, kneeling beside her. For a moment they were silent again, the firelight painting them in gold and amber. You amaze me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Even in the worst moments you find a way to stand. She smiled faintly. You only say that because you've never seen me break. I've seen you bend, he said, but never break. The sound of rain began outside, soft at first, then steady. The fire crackled, shadows flickering across her face. She tied the last knot in the thread and placed the needle aside. When she looked at him again, there was something new in her eyes. Not forgiveness, not yet love renewed, but trust trying to breathe again. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The movement was gentle, deliberate, filled with everything words couldn't say. The room grew quiet. The world outside was chaos, but inside, it felt like they'd found a small island where time paused. Rowan spoke again. When I walked in and saw them laughing, something in me went cold. I didn't care about the money, I just wanted it to stop. I wanted you to feel safe. She looked at the fire. You can't buy safety, Rowan. You can only build it. Then let's build it, he said. Even if we start from ashes. That line hung between them, fragile and heavy. She didn't answer, but her silence wasn't rejection. It was thought. Deep, hesitant thought. Later that night, she went upstairs to their room. The air smelled like rain and lavender. She stood before the mirror, still wearing the mended gown. The stitches were visible now, but somehow they made it more beautiful, like proof of survival. Rowan entered quietly, setting 2 mugs of tea on the bedside table. He watched her reflection as she touched the repaired seam. "I used to think torn things lost their worth," she said softly. "Now I think they just tell better stories." He stepped behind her, close enough for her to feel his warmth. "Then your story's the most beautiful I've ever heard." Their eyes met in the mirror. The moment stretched, a quiet intimacy that spoke louder than any embrace. His hand brushed against hers. She didn't pull away. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, but neither moved. The silence was charged, not empty. She finally turned, meeting his gaze directly. "If we're going to make this work," she said, "then we need honesty. No more secrets. No more pretending you can protect me by hiding me." He nodded slowly. "Agreed. From now on we face everything together." "Even the world?" she asked. "Especially the world," he replied. She smiled, a small tired smile that carried hope. "Then tomorrow we begin again." He exhaled, relief softening the tension in his shoulders. "Tomorrow," he repeated, as if promising himself too. They sat together near the window as rain painted the glass. He told her about his business, the pressures, the loneliness of a life people envied but didn't understand. She told him about her fears, how being loved by someone like him felt like standing too close to lightning. It was bright, breathtaking, but dangerous if she wasn't careful. He told her he'd rather burn than lose her. She told him she'd rather learn how to hold the fire. The night deepened, the fire dimmed, and they stayed there, 2 hearts learning how to beat in the same rhythm again. But just as comfort began to settle, his phone buzzed on the table, a single message lighting up the screen. Arya saw the name flash before he could hide it. Her expression changed, the softness in her eyes turning wary. He silenced the phone too quickly. She didn't ask, not yet. But the silence that followed wasn't the same as before. It was sharp, cold, edged with suspicion. He felt it too. "Rowan," she said quietly. "Who was that?" He hesitated. Just a second too long. And in that second, every wall she'd started lowering began to rise again. Outside, the rain kept falling, whispering against the window like a warning neither wanted to hear. He finally said, "It's nothing important." But the way he avoided her gaze told her it was. She stood slowly, wrapping the mended gown tighter around her. "Nothing important never shows up with that much urgency," she said. "Especially not at midnight." He wanted to explain, to say it was work, to tell her it was just another contract, another thing he'd fix before it broke. But his words came too late. She walked to the doorway, her back straight, her voice calm. "You promised no more secrets. Don't break that promise before the ink even dries." Then she left the room, her footsteps fading down the hall. Rowan stood there, phone still glowing in his hand, guilt heavy in his chest. The message stayed unread, but the damage was already done. The night that had begun with peace now trembled with something darker, doubt. He looked out the window, the storm raging stronger now. He thought of the bar, the torn gown, the moment he thought love alone could fix everything. He was wrong. Love, like the gown she mended, needed more than thread. It needed truth. And the truth was knocking at their door. The message buzzed again. This time he read it. It was from someone he never expected to hear from again. The scene froze there, the storm howling louder outside. The fire dimmed to embers, the phone screen still glowing in his hand. Somewhere down the hall, Arya stood alone, heart pounding, wondering if love was about to tear for a second time. And that, right there, was the moment the story shifted, where peace met its next test. Because sometimes, what ruins a night isn't humiliation from others, but the secrets we keep from the ones we love. The camera of the story would fade out on that image, light flickering on his face, storm shadow in his eyes, as the narrator's voice carried a low whisper to the audience. What would you have done if you were in Arya's place? Would you trust again, or walk away before the truth broke you twice? Chapter 3. The night sky above Willow Springs was a dark velvet, scattered with silver freckles of stars that shimmered like the breath of old promises. Miles drove through it in silence, the hum of the tires the only sound slicing through the quiet. The dashboard light threw a soft blue hue across his face. A man caught somewhere between guilt and longing, between the woman he'd lost and the one he couldn't stop thinking about. Ella sat beside him, arms folded, her reflection caught in the passenger window. Half shadow, half light. The radio murmured low, an old country tune barely audible beneath the wind. Neither of them spoke for miles. It wasn't awkward, it was heavy, like the air before a storm. She finally broke the silence. "You didn't have to drive me home." He glanced at her, then back at the road. "Yeah, I did." "Why?" "Because you looked like you needed someone who wouldn't walk away." Her breath caught, not because of the words but because of the way he said them. No hesitation. No pretending. Just truth stripped of charm. "Maybe I don't deserve that," she murmured. Miles gave a half-smile. "Maybe none of us do. But sometimes life gives it anyway." They reached the old dirt road that led to her place. The headlights washed over the white fence, the worn gate, and the apple tree that leaned like it had secrets of its own. Ella looked at her porch, that same spot where she'd watched sunsets and heartbreaks alike, and then back at him. "I haven't had someone stay this long," she said softly. "Then maybe tonight's different." He parked the truck. The crickets filled the silence again, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. She reached for the door handle, but her fingers froze. "Do you ever feel like you're stuck between what you want and what you fear?" she asked. He turned the ignition off. "Every damn day." And that's when it happened. The small, brave glance between two people who'd been pretending they didn't need saving. Mini cliffhanger moment. The air thick with emotion, the unspoken hovering between them. "Ella." "Yeah. If I told you that you're the first person I've felt alive with in years, would you believe me?" Her lips parted, eyes softening. "I think I already do." And before he could second-guess himself, she leaned in, not for a kiss, but for a closeness that said everything. Her head rested against his shoulder. The sound of her breath, steady and fragile, anchored him. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, the world narrowing to a truck cab and the scent of her shampoo, lavender and rain. Then her phone buzzed. The name flashing on the screen froze her blood. "Taylor." She jerked back slightly, eyes wide. Miles noticed immediately. "Someone important." "It's complicated. Isn't it always?" She silenced the call. But her hands trembled slightly, and he saw it. The moment that had been tender now burned with uncertainty. "Is he the reason you keep looking over your shoulder?" he asked quietly. Her silence was answer enough. Miles's jaw tightened. "Ella, you need to tell me what's going on." Her voice cracked. "Not tonight. Please." "Then when?" "When I figure out how to stop running." Cliffhanger tension began rising again. Romantic, emotional, layered with danger. He didn't push further. Instead he said, "Then I'll wait. Just don't shut me out, okay?" She nodded. "Okay." They stepped out of the truck, gravel crunching underfoot. The night air was colder now. She looked up at him one last time before heading to the porch. And just as she reached the steps, a car's headlights appeared in the distance, slow, deliberate, cutting through the darkness like a warning. Her face went pale. "Is that him?" Miles whispered. "I don't know," she said, but the fear in her eyes said otherwise. The car rolled past, but the way it slowed near her gate made both their hearts race. After a few tense seconds, it disappeared down the road. Ella exhaled shakily. "He's watching me again." Miles took a step closer. "He's your ex." She hesitated. "Not exactly." "He's someone I used to trust." "Used to." He changed. "After what happened with my father's land deal. After everything." "Ella." "Don't," she interrupted, voice trembling. "If you stay too close, he'll come after you too." Miles reached out, gently lifting her chin so she'd meet his gaze. "Then he'll learn I don't scare easy." The moment heavy with both defiance and the spark of something undeniable. The porch light flickered on behind her. She stepped back, unsure whether to thank him or run. "Good night, Miles." He gave a slow nod. "Good night, Ella." But as he drove away, the thought wouldn't leave him, that he'd just stepped into a story much bigger than he understood. The next morning, Ella stood at the kitchen sink, watching the same road where his truck disappeared hours ago. The sunlight spilled across the counter, catching the edges of the coffee mug she wasn't drinking from. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Another text. "You think he can protect you? He doesn't even know the truth." Her breath caught. The mug slipped from her fingers and shattered. Outside, a car door slammed. She froze. The front door creaked. "Ella." It was Miles. Relief flooded her eyes. "You scared me." "Sorry. I was in town early, figured I'd check on you." She forced a smile. "I'm fine." But her trembling hands told another story. He noticed the broken mug. "You're shaking." "I just dropped it." "Ella. Please," she whispered. "Just don't ask right now." Miles didn't push. He knew better than to pry at a wound that wasn't ready to bleed. But he also knew she was hiding something dangerous. They went outside to sit on the porch, the morning air crisp, the silence between them thick with questions neither dared to ask. Finally Ella spoke. "When I was younger, I thought love was supposed to save you. And now I think love just shows you who you really are when everything else falls apart." He looked at her, not just looked but saw her. Every scar she tried to hide, every piece of her that wanted to be loved but didn't know how to accept it. That's when the intimacy began to shift. Subtle, emotional, slow burning. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "Maybe love can still save you," he said softly. "Maybe you just need to let it." She looked at him for a long moment, eyes glassy but full of something fierce. "You talk like a man who's lost something." "I did," he said. "And maybe you're helping me find it again." The air between them turned fragile and warm. But before the moment could deepen, the sound of a phone notification broke through again. Another message. "You can't hide from the past forever, Ella." Her face went white. He saw it. "Who keeps texting you?" she whispered. "Someone who thinks he owns me." Miles's voice hardened. "He doesn't." Her lip trembled. "You don't know what he's capable of." "Then tell me." The wind rustled through the apple tree. The tension rose again. Emotional, romantic, dangerous. Ella finally said. "His name is Tyler. He used to be my fiancé." Miles froze. "Fiancé?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Until I found out he wasn't who I thought he was." "What did he do?" She looked away. "He made me part of something illegal. Without my consent." Miles's heart pounded. "Ella." "He forged my father's signature on a land transfer. When I tried to expose it, he came after me." "So you ran?" She nodded. "And I've been running ever since." Silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. Miles took a deep breath. "You don't have to run anymore." Her eyes flickered to his. "You don't understand, Miles. He doesn't stop." He leaned closer, voice low but steady. "Then he hasn't met someone who knows how to stand his ground." Mini cliffhanger again. The rising heat between courage and fear, protection and desire. She looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone. "Hi viewers," Miles's voice broke through softly. "Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story." The narrative flowed again seamlessly. Cinematic, rhythmic, alive. As the chapter closed, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the hills, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Ella stood, eyes wide. "It's starting again," she whispered. Miles frowned. "What is?" "The storm," she said. "It always starts when he's close." Lightning cracked across the sky, and a figure appeared at the edge of the road, just standing there, watching. Her heart stopped. Miles turned to look. No one was there. Only the rain. But deep down they both knew, this wasn't over. Chapter 4. The rain came harder, drumming against the roof like a heartbeat that wouldn't calm down. Miles stood at the edge of the porch, watching the road fade beneath sheets of silver. Every instinct in him screamed that something was wrong. Ella was behind him, frozen near the door, arms wrapped around herself as if the storm outside had somehow found its way into her chest. "You saw someone," she whispered. "Tell me you saw him too." Miles didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the road, the dark fields, the tree line that stretched like a shadow's grin. "I saw movement," he said finally. "Could have been an animal." Her voice broke. "No, it wasn't." He turned, stepping toward her. "Ella, you're safe. I'm here now." But even he didn't believe his own words. Inside, the lights flickered twice and went out completely. The house plunged into darkness. Ella gasped and grabbed his arm. "It's just the power lines," he murmured, but the tension in his jaw betrayed him. He found a flashlight in the drawer by memory, flicked it on, and the soft cone of light fell across her face. Pale, trembling, beautiful. "You should get some rest," he said. She shook her head. "I can't. Not tonight." "Then we'll wait it out together." They sat by the window, rain tapping the glass like a secret code. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence stretched thin, held together only by the rhythm of the storm. Finally Ella said, "You shouldn't have come back." Miles looked at her. "Why?" "Because the people who get close to me end up hurt." He leaned back, voice low. "Maybe I'm not the kind of man who runs from trouble. You don't know what he's capable of, Miles. Tyler doesn't forgive. He destroys." The thunder rolled again, louder this time, shaking the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine started. Both of them froze. Miles stood up slowly, grabbing the flashlight. "Stay here." "Wait," she said, reaching for his hand. "Don't go out there." He squeezed her fingers once, firm, reassuring, then let go. "I'll just look." He stepped outside into the downpour, flashlight beams slicing through sheets of rain. Every sound felt amplified. The wind in the trees, the creak of the gate, the low hum of water running down the gutter. His pulse thundered with it. At the far end of the yard, he saw tire tracks in the mud. Fresh ones. His heart kicked hard. He followed them to the road, where they disappeared into the darkness. That's when he heard it, the faint click of a camera shutter. Once. He spun around. Nothing. But someone was out there. Back inside, Ella waited by the window, eyes wide. When he came back, soaked to the bone, she met him halfway. "Tell me," she said. "What did you see?" He hesitated. "Nothing clear. But someone's watching." "You were right." Her breath hitched. "Oh God." Miles reached up, gently brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. "We'll figure this out. Together." Her eyes searched his face. "Why are you helping me?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe because you remind me of someone I couldn't save." The way he said it made her chest tighten. Grief and affection tangled in his voice. She wanted to ask who, but didn't. The look in his eyes said the memory still hurt too much to touch. For a moment, the tension between them shifted. No longer fear, but something softer. The storm outside blurred into a low, steady hum as they stood close enough to feel each other's breath. She whispered, "You shouldn't make promises you can't keep. And you shouldn't hide from the people who actually care." Their eyes met. Lightning flashed, outlining their silhouettes in silver. Neither moved, neither spoke, the air too thick with emotion to break. Then a sound shattered it, the distinct crash of glass from the kitchen. A gasp. Miles turned instantly, flashlight swinging toward the noise. He moved quickly, checking the back door. The latch had been forced open. Someone had been inside. The beam caught muddy footprints leading across the floor. "Stay back," he warned. But Ella followed anyway, clutching the hem of his jacket. Together they traced the prints to the window by the sink, shattered from the outside. Something glinted on the counter, a single silver key. Ella's stomach dropped. "That's Tyler's." Miles picked it up, frowning. "How would he even get in here?" Her voice trembled. "He still has a copy of the old house key. I never changed the locks after I left." Miles swore under his breath. "We're changing them tomorrow." But deep down they both knew. Locks wouldn't stop a man like Tyler. They spent the rest of the night in the living room, too wired to sleep. The flashlight dimmed to a weak glow, and by the time dawn crept over the hills, the storm had passed, leaving everything wet and silent. Ella sat curled up on the couch, knees pulled to her chest. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I can't keep living like this." Miles crouched beside her. "Then stop running. Let me help." She looked at him, tears slipping down. "He'll kill you." He smiled, tired but unyielding. "Let him try." Her hand brushed his cheek. "Why would you risk that for me?" He held her gaze. "Because I think I'm already too far gone to stop caring." She exhaled shakily. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it makes it harder to let you go." A soft silence fell, full of unspoken words and fragile warmth. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the tension still hung in the air, quiet and heavy. Then she whispered, "You said someone you couldn't save. Who was she?" Miles hesitated. His eyes dropped. "My wife." Ella froze. "You were married." He nodded slowly. "Her name was Claire. We were together 5 years. She died in a car accident while I was deployed overseas. I wasn't there." Her eyes softened. "I'm so sorry." He swallowed hard. "I told myself I'd never let anyone that close again. And then you came along." That was the first time she saw the cracks in his armor, the pain he kept buried beneath his calm exterior. The vulnerability made her chest ache. She reached out, taking his hand. "Maybe this time you can save us both." Mini cliffhanger. Emotional connection deepening, the storm outside mirrored by one inside them. Just as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the window, Miles's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, an unknown number. One message. "Walk away, Miles. Last warning." He showed her the screen. "He's coming for me now too." Ella's face went pale. "We have to go." "Where?" Someplace he won't think to look. Do you have one? She hesitated. Maybe. My grandmother's cabin up near Lake Bellamy. No one knows about it. Then that's where we'll go. Miles stood already in motion. Pack whatever you can carry. We leave in 10. Ella hesitated at the window, staring out at the wet fields, her mind spinning. He won't stop, Miles. Neither will I, he said, loading his gun and tucking it into his jacket. Let's move. They drove for hours, the countryside rolling by in silence. She watched the trees blur past, her thoughts tangled between fear and something dangerously close to hope. At one point she said softly, "You don't have to protect me." He shot her a look. "Yeah, I do." "No, you don't. You barely know me." He gripped the wheel. "Maybe I don't know your whole story, but I know what it looks like when someone's been hurt too much to ask for help." Her eyes filled with tears. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is. You just haven't had someone fight for you in a while." The intimacy wasn't in words now. It was in the way he reached over and took her hand without asking, and the way she didn't pull away this time. "Hi viewers," his voice cut gently through the air. "Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story." Back in the narrative, the rain eased off completely. The tension built in silence. As they reached the narrow dirt road leading to the cabin, the air grew colder, the woods thicker. Birds scattered as the truck rolled past. When they arrived, Ella stepped out, staring at the old cabin half hidden by trees. It looked forgotten but safe. For now. Inside, dust floated in the light. The place smelled of cedar and memory. She touched the mantel, where an old photograph still stood. Her grandmother holding her as a child. "She used to say love's the only thing worth being afraid of," Ella murmured. Miles smiled faintly. "Smart woman." She turned to him. "You really think we can stay hidden here?" "I think we can try." He helped her light the fireplace, the flicker of flames reflecting off their faces. For the first time in days, warmth filled the room. Ella watched the fire crackle. "I don't remember the last time I felt safe." "Maybe it starts now," Miles said softly. She turned toward him, and the look that passed between them said everything words couldn't. But before anything more could happen, a faint sound echoed from outside. Car door. Then another. Ella's breath hitched. "No one's supposed to know we're here." Miles stood, tension snapping back into his shoulders. "Stay behind me." They moved to the window. Through the branches, they saw two dark SUVs parked down the road. Men in black jackets stepped out, scanning the woods. Ella whispered, "Oh my God, he found us." Miles's jaw tightened. "Then we make this our line in the sand." The wind howled outside. The fire flickered lower. And for a heartbeat, everything went still, right before the danger crashed in again. Chapter 5. The first gunshot shattered the quiet like glass exploding in slow motion. Miles hit the floor instinctively, dragging Ella down beside him. The cabin walls vibrated as another shot cracked through the trees. She gasped, covering her mouth, her heartbeat wild against his chest. "They found us," she whispered. "I know," he said, voice calm but tight. "We're not staying here." He grabbed his bag from the floor, pulling out a pistol and an old map. The way he moved, focused fast, told her this wasn't the first time he'd been hunted. "There's an old service tunnel behind the cabin," he said. "Your grandfather built it during the flood years." "How do you know that?" "Because I checked the blueprints on the way here. I don't take chances." A bullet splintered the window frame above their heads. Ella flinched. He pressed a hand to her cheek. "Look at me, not at them. We get out, we stay quiet, and we don't stop until we reach the ridge. Understand?" She nodded, trembling. He guided her toward the trapdoor beneath the rug. When he pulled it open, the smell of earth and cedar filled the air. The narrow tunnel stretched into darkness. "Go," he whispered. "I'll cover us." "But Miles." "Go, Ella." She crawled inside, the dirt cold beneath her hands. He followed close behind, flashlight dim, pistol ready. Behind them, the cabin door burst open. Heavy boots pounded the floorboards. Miles turned off the light. Silence swallowed them. For several long seconds, the only sounds were their breathing and the distant footsteps above. Then a voice echoed from the cabin. Deep, smooth, cruelly calm. "You can't hide from me, Ella." She froze. The voice was unmistakable. "Taylor." "Come out, sweetheart," he called. "Let's not make this ugly." Miles clenched his jaw. He placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her shaking frame. "Keep moving," he mouthed. They crawled through the darkness until faint moonlight shimmered ahead. The tunnel ended behind a cluster of trees. Miles pushed the exit open carefully, scanning the woods. The SUVs still glowed faintly in the distance, engines running, but the men had spread out, flashlights sweeping the trees like restless ghosts. He turned to Ella. "This way." They moved fast, weaving between trunks, shoes slipping in the wet soil. Branches snapped behind them, too close. Ella stumbled, catching herself against a tree. "Wait," she whispered. "They're following." He looked back, beams of light slicing through the dark. He grabbed her hand and pulled her forward. "Run." They didn't stop until the forest thinned near the ridge. The air burned in their lungs, every sound amplified. Somewhere behind them a man shouted. Then silence again. Miles crouched beside her, catching his breath. "We'll rest here." Her voice trembled. "He was right there, Miles. I heard him. I heard Tyler." "I know." Tears glistened in her eyes. "I can't keep doing this. I can't live like prey." He turned toward her, his expression raw with determination. "Then don't. You fight back." Her eyes widened. "You think I can fight him?" "I know you can. Because I've seen what fear does when you stop running." For a heartbeat neither spoke. The storm clouds above were breaking, revealing a sky streaked with gray. The faintest light of dawn bled through the trees. That's when he said quietly, "He won't stop until one of us does." And that truth settled like a knife between them. "Hi viewers," his voice cut through the narrative smoothly. "Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story." Back in the scene, Ella stared at the horizon. "If we make it out of this," she whispered, "promise me something." "What?" "Promise you won't disappear." He smiled faintly. "That's not who I am anymore." But as the wind shifted, his expression changed, alert, guarded. "We need to move. Now." They followed the ridge down to an abandoned ranger station. The windows were boarded, the roof half collapsed, but it was shelter. Miles checked the corners, the back entrance, then motioned her inside. He found a lantern and an old first aid kit. "You're bleeding," he said, noticing the scrape on her arm. "It's nothing." He shook his head, wrapping it gently. "You always say that. And you always fix it." For a moment their hands lingered. The air between them grew heavy, not with fear this time but something unspoken. She looked up at him, eyes soft. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "A man who'd save me for the thrill of it." He smiled slightly. "You think I'm here for the thrill? I think you're here because you needed to remember who you were before life broke you." Her words landed deep, disarming him. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Or maybe I'm just falling for a woman who doesn't realize how strong she already is." Her breath caught. She looked away before he could see her blush. But that fragile moment shattered when headlights flashed across the trees outside. Miles froze. "They found us again." He grabbed her hand. "Basement. Go." They ran down the steps just as the front door burst open. Heavy boots echoed overhead. Voices. Search everywhere. Ella covered her mouth, trembling. Miles positioned himself in front of her. Gun raised, eyes locked on the stairway. One wrong sound, one breath too loud, and it would be over. The footsteps moved closer. The wood creaked above. Then silence. She looked at him, terrified. "Did they leave?" He didn't answer. He listened. Then a loud crash and smoke filled the air. "They're burning it," he said, coughing. "We have to go now." He smashed open a small basement window, helped her crawl through, and followed as flames erupted above them. They tumbled into the dirt, coughing, faces lit orange by the inferno. Behind them, the station burned like the past itself. Fierce, consuming, final. They ran again, disappearing into the trees as sirens wailed somewhere distant. When they finally stopped, miles from the blaze, the night was silent again. Ella turned to him, exhausted, tear-streaked, but alive. "You could have left me," she said. He looked at her like she was the only thing left worth saving. "I never leave what matters." And in that quiet, broken moment they kissed. Not perfectly, not calmly, but desperately. Like two souls clinging to light in a world determined to turn dark. Their lips parted only when breath became impossible. Her forehead rested against his. "What happens now?" He smiled softly. "Now we stop running." But deep down both knew the storm wasn't done. Chapter 6. The next morning, they reached the outskirts of a small town called Ridgevale. Miles found a rundown motel, the kind of place where people paid in cash and didn't ask names. Inside, the air smelled of old smoke and dust, but it was warm, safe enough for a few hours. Ella sat on the bed, silent, staring at her hands. "You think he knows where we are?" "He will," Miles said, checking the locks. "Tyler has eyes everywhere. But that just means we stay unpredictable." She smiled weakly. "You're good at that. I've had practice." He turned to her, noticing the dark circles under her eyes. "Get some sleep. I'll keep watch. You need rest too." He shrugged. "Later." She hesitated, then reached for his hand. "Don't disappear when I close my eyes." "I won't." When she finally slept, he sat by the window, gun in his lap, watching the empty road outside. Every shadow looked like movement, every gust of wind like footsteps. But what haunted him most wasn't the threat outside. It was the feeling growing inside. He was falling, and fast. Hours later he dozed off. When he woke, Ella was gone. Panic hit instantly. He scanned the room, her bag was missing. The door was cracked open. He ran outside, heart pounding. The morning light was gray and cold. Down the street he saw her, standing by a payphone, hands shaking. He approached quietly. "Ella!" He turned, startled. "Miles, I'm sorry I had to." "You called him, didn't you?" Her voice broke. "I just wanted to end it. To tell him I'm done running." He stepped closer, anger and fear tangled in his voice. "You can't negotiate with a man like that." "He's my husband," she snapped, tears spilling. "He used to love me. Maybe part of him still does." Miles stared at her, silent for a long moment. "And what about me, Ella? What if part of me already does too?" She froze, lips trembling. The confession hung heavy in the air. Before she could answer, a black SUV turned the corner fast. "Tyler's men." "Run!" Miles shouted. They sprinted down the alley, gunfire exploding behind them. Glass shattered, metal sparked. Miles fired back, hitting one tire. The SUV swerved, crashed into a pole. But more were coming. They ducked into an old train yard, hiding between rusted cars. The sound of boots echoed. Ella pressed against him, breathing hard. "This doesn't end until he's gone," Miles said. She nodded. "Then we end it." For the first time there was no fear in her eyes. Only resolve. He smiled. "That's the woman I saw the first day I met you." "How did you even find me that day?" she asked softly. "I was hired to protect someone else in that hospital," he said. "But I couldn't take my eyes off you. You looked like someone fighting a war no one else could see. And now you're in it," she whispered. "Gladly." Their moment broke when headlights flooded the yard. Voices shouted. They were surrounded. Miles grabbed her hand. "Stay close." They weaved through the maze of trains, dodging bullets, sparks flying off metal. He fired back, covering their escape. Finally, they ducked beneath a freight car, rolling into a drainage ditch that led under the yard. When they crawled out on the other side, both were covered in mud, shaking but alive. Ella started to laugh, hysterical, breathless. "We're still alive." He grinned, wiping blood from his arm. "Barely." But before either could breathe, a voice echoed from behind a truck. "Well, isn't this touching?" Tyler stepped out, smirking, gun in hand. Ella froze. "Tyler!" He looked her up and down, his tone dripping with venom. You really thought you could hide from me? With him? Miles stepped forward. Put the gun down. Tyler sneered. You think you can take from me what's mine? She's not yours, Miles said. Not anymore. Tyler's smile faded. Then you die first. He raised the gun. And the screen cuts to black. Chapter 7. The gunshot rang out, but not the way anyone expected. Tyler's arm jerked back, the weapon clattering to the ground. Ella stood frozen, a small pistol trembling in her hands. I told you to leave me alone, she whispered. Tyler stared at her, stunned. You shot me. She stepped closer, tears streaming, voice trembling but steady. You made me forget who I was. You made me believe I needed you. But I remember now. He stumbled back, clutching his bleeding arm. You'll regret this. Miles moved fast, kicking the gun away. No, Tyler. You will. He cuffed him with zip ties, calling the police with a burner phone. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Ella dropped the gun, shaking. It's over, she said. Miles turned to her slowly. Yeah, it is. But even as the police lights flashed and Tyler was dragged away, the air between them was thick. Grief, relief, and something deeper. She stepped into him, resting her forehead against his chest. I didn't mean to. He silenced her gently. You did what you had to. You saved both of us. Her tears wet his shirt. I didn't think I could be brave. He smiled softly. You've been brave since the day you decided to walk away from him. As the officers left, the dawn finally broke over Ridgevale. The world felt different, lighter. Days later, they sat by the lake near the burned cabin. The water shimmered gold, the woods quiet again. Ella said softly, I don't know what happens next. Miles took her hand. Maybe that's the best part. She looked at him, eyes warm. You think we deserve peace. I think we've earned it. Their fingers intertwined. The world around them stilled. And for the first time in years, she smiled without fear. But just as the camera pulls back, a phone buzzes in Miles's jacket. Unknown number. One message. You think it's over. Cliffhanger. The screen fades to black, leaving hearts racing, waiting for Chapter 8. Chapter 8. The message burned on his phone screen like it had been written in fire. You think it's over. Miles stared at it, the words reflected in his eyes. His jaw tightening with every breath. The woods around him were silent, too still, as if the air itself was listening. Ella was sitting by the lake, her fingers tracing circles on the surface of the water, unaware of the storm that had just been reignited. He slipped the phone into his pocket, forcing his heartbeat to steady. Not yet. Not here. Hey, she said softly without turning. You ever think maybe peace feels too quiet? He walked over, kneeling beside her. Sometimes quiet's just the world catching its breath before something big happens. She smiled faintly. That sounds like something you'd say when you don't trust peace. Maybe I don't. Their eyes met, the kind of moment that felt like standing at the edge of something dangerous and beautiful at the same time. She leaned her head on his shoulder, unaware of the weight behind his silence. When night came, they sat by a small fire. The flames flickered across her face, warm and golden, softening the lines that fear had carved there. She said quietly, I had a dream last night. Tyler was gone, the cabin was whole again, and you were building a porch swing. He smiled. That sounds nice. It was. Until the phone rang. He froze. What phone? She looked at him, eyes narrowing slightly. The one that kept ringing even when I woke up. He swallowed. Maybe it was just a dream. But she saw the flicker in his expression, that tiny betraying shadow of worry. Miles, she whispered. What happened? He sighed, staring into the flames. Someone sent a message. No name. Just words. What words? He met her gaze, voice low. You think it's over. Her heart dropped. You think it's him. I don't know. But I know trouble doesn't send reminders unless it's already on the way. She stood, panic in her chest. Then we need to go. No, he said. We need to find out who sent it. If it's Tyler's people, there'll be more. And if it's not, then it's someone worse. The next morning, they packed everything they had and drove toward the nearest town with cell towers strong enough to trace the message. The road stretched endless, gray skies pressing low, a storm brewing somewhere behind them. Inside the diner, the smell of coffee and bacon felt almost too normal. Miles set up his laptop, fingers moving fast. Ella watched, hands wrapped around her mug. You ever get tired of living like this? Every day, he said without looking up. But stopping's not an option. He traced the origin of the text, a signal bouncing through 3 countries before landing in a place that didn't exist on the map. He frowned. What? She asked. It's not just Tyler. This number links to something bigger. Someone's been watching us since before the cabin burned. She felt the chill before he even said it. Who? He closed the laptop, his jaw set. Someone who doesn't like loose ends. That night, they checked into another motel, one with flickering lights and peeling wallpaper. Miles didn't sleep. He stood by the window, staring into the parking lot where rain fell in a steady rhythm. At 2 a.m., the headlights appeared. 1 car. Then another. Then 3. He woke Ella. Get up. We've been found. She didn't ask how. She just trusted him. They slipped out the back door as the first set of boots hit the front steps. The air was cold, the rain stinging. They ran through the alley, hearts pounding, shoes splashing in puddles. Behind them voices shouted. When they reached the bridge, Miles stopped, breathing hard. You trust me. With my life, she said. Then jump. Before she could think, he took her hand and leapt. The river swallowed them whole. Cold, violent, alive. She fought to surface, gasping as the current dragged them beneath. He grabbed her waist, pulling them toward the far bank. When they crawled onto the mud, shivering and soaked, she clung to him, crying and laughing at the same time. You're insane, she whispered. He smiled weakly. You're welcome. But even soaked and breathless, their eyes lingered longer than before. The chaos around them made the quiet between them feel almost sacred. And in that silence, something changed. Something unspoken, irreversible. Chapter 9. They found shelter in an old farmhouse miles from town. The windows were shattered, the roof half caved in, but it had walls and a fireplace. Miles lit a small fire, his clothes steaming as they dried. Ella sat beside him, knees pulled close, her gaze locked on the flames. You ever wonder why it had to be us? He turned to her. What do you mean? This. All of it. Maybe fate keeps circling the same 2 people until one of them gets it right. He smiled faintly. Or maybe fate's just bad at letting go. She laughed softly, leaning back against the wall. Either way, I'm done running. Whatever comes next, I face it with you. He hesitated, then brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. You sure about that? I've never been surer of anything. The fire cracked, and the world around them seemed to pause. She looked up at him, and the distance that had lived between them for so long finally vanished. Their lips met again, slower this time, not desperate but certain. The kind of kiss that made time feel fragile. But their peace didn't last. The next morning, Miles woke to the sound of static. His laptop, still wet, had powered itself on. A video feed flickered on the screen. A shadowed face appeared, distorted by the signal. Miles Carter, the voice said, calm, cold. You've cost us time and money. Bring the girl, or we'll take her ourselves. The feed cut. He stared at the blank screen, his reflection trembling. Ella stirred. What happened? He closed the laptop. They found us again. She stood angry now. Then let them come. I'm tired of hiding. He looked at her, pride and fear colliding in his eyes. You've changed. No, she said. You helped me remember who I was before fear took everything. He stepped closer. Then let's finish this. They spent the day preparing. maps, routes, weapons, plans. When night fell, they drove toward the edge of the city where the signal originated. A warehouse, silent and empty from the outside. Miles cut the lights. "Stay behind me." She nodded, slipping the small pistol into her jacket. Inside, the air smelled of rust and oil. Shadows stretched across the walls. And then, a familiar voice broke the silence. "Nice of you to come, Miles." It wasn't Tyler. It was someone worse, the man who'd hired him years ago. The man who'd betrayed him. "Logan," Miles said. "Always the hero," Logan sneered. "You could have stayed hidden. Instead, you burned my network to the ground." "Your network trafficked people like her," Miles said. "You don't get to talk about choice." Logan smiled darkly. "Then let's make this simple. You hand her over, you walk away." Ella stepped forward before Miles could stop her. "No. I'm not anyone's bargaining chip." Logan aimed his gun at her. "Then you die with him." The next few seconds happened too fast to process. Miles lunged, a gunshot cracked, the lights shattered. Screams echoed through the darkness. When the dust settled, Logan was on the floor, wounded but alive. Miles stood over him, gun trained. "This ends now," Miles said. Logan smirked through the blood. "You think you've won. You're part of this now. Every name, every file, it's all tied to you. You'll never be free." Miles hesitated, just long enough for Logan to reach for his weapon. Another shot. This time, Ella pulled the trigger. He looked at her. Shock and sorrow tangled in his eyes. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," she said. "So you could finally stop running." The sirens grew louder outside. Miles dropped his gun, hands trembling. "It's over." But she looked at him, eyes wet, voice trembling. "Is it?" Chapter 10. Weeks passed. The news called it a raid. Dozens of arrests. Logan declared dead. Ella and Miles disappeared. Some said they ran to Mexico. Others said they built a life somewhere quiet. But the truth was simpler. They found a small cabin by a lake, rebuilt the one they lost. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Ella sat on the porch, watching the ripples dance across the water. Miles walked out with 2 mugs of coffee. "You still check the windows?" she asked. He nodded. "Old habits die hard." She smiled softly. "So do we." They sat together in silence. No more running, no more chasing ghosts, just the sound of wind and water. Then the phone buzzed again. Ella frowned. "Who could possibly?" He answered. Static. Then a voice. "Hello, Miles." The mug slipped from his hand. It wasn't Logan. It wasn't Tyler. It was a woman's voice. Cold, precise. "You took something that belonged to us," she said. "And now we're coming for both of you." The line went dead. Ella looked at him, fear flickering in her eyes. "Who was that?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the phone, the weight of old sins creeping back through the cracks of their peace. She touched his arm gently. "Tell me what's going on." He looked at her, voice barely a whisper. "This started long before you. And it's not over." A slow rumble of thunder rolled over the lake, the wind shifting like a warning. He took her hand, squeezing it tight. "Whatever happens next," he said, "we face it together." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Together." The camera pulls back, the lake glimmering beneath the storm clouds, 2 silhouettes holding onto each other as darkness gathers once more. Then the screen fades to black. A soft voice over the outro says, "Thank you for being part of this journey. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and your words might inspire someone else's courage." The final sound is the echo of thunder rolling across the water, and the faint buzz of another message waiting to be read.